Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into one of the really big challenges in AI right now, building models that can truly understand and generate across different kinds of data, like text and images, all in one system.
Right.
But the paper we're looking at today takes a pretty fascinating turn on this.
That's right. Yeah, instead of trying to build like one massive monolithic model to do absolutely everything, this paper suggests a philosophy that feels, well, almost like smart specialization. Let the experts do what they do best.
Okay.
Their line is kind of cool. Render unto diffusion what is generative, and unto LLMs what is understanding.
So they're leaning heavily on the power we already have in existing pre-trained models. Basically, keep those multimodal large language models, the MLLMs, exactly as they are, frozen, because they're already fantastic at understanding complex stuff.
Exactly. World-class understanding, reasoning.
And then pair them up with diffusion models, which, let's be honest, are leading the pack right now for generating super realistic images.
And the core innovation here, the real breakthrough, is the piece that connects these two powerhouses. It's a new architectural bit they call MetaQueries.
MetaQuery, okay.
Yeah, it acts as this essential bridge, and it lets the frozen MLLM transfer its deep understanding, its knowledge, into usable conditions for the diffusion model to actually generate images from.
And the results they're showing with MetaQueries sound pretty remarkable. It seems this approach can get you state-of-the-art multimodal understanding and state-of-the-art level generation simultaneously.
Yeah, that's the big claim.
And crucially, it looks like it successfully transfers those really advanced MLLM skills, like complex reasoning, world knowledge access, even in-context learning directly into the image generation part.
And importantly, they show it does this way more efficiently than methods that force you to fine-tune those enormous MLLM backbones. We're not just talking basic text-to-image either. MetaQuery can handle complex things like sophisticated image editing, reconstruction, and even tricky subject-driven generation.
Okay, that's the quick flyby. So our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack how this MetaQuery bridge actually works, understand the clever design choices they made along the way, and figure out why these results are such a potentially significant step forward for building, capable but also efficient, unified multimodal models.
Absolutely. Building systems that can seamlessly understand and generate across different modalities, these unified models. It's really one of the, holy grails in AI right now.
Yeah.
Just imagine a single AI that can look at a complex picture, describe it, answer tricky questions about it, and then turn around and generate a totally new image based on a prompt that requires like real-world reasoning, or maybe edit the original image just how you asked.
That is the dream, isn't it? But the sort of standard approach, usually training a single massive autoregressive model on like sequences of text tokens and pixel tokens mixed together, that runs into major problems.
It does. Scaling those giant monolithic models to handle really complex, nuanced tasks where you need deep understanding and high-fidelity generation, it gets computationally incredibly expensive.
Right.
And just plain difficult.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Those models are powerful, no doubt, but they often struggle to hit top performance on both understanding and generation at the same time. Or they just need insane amounts of training resources.
So this paper argues for a different path.
Yeah, basically, don't reinvent the wheel. Let's leverage the amazing understanding capabilities already baked into these massive pre-trained MLLMs and just combine them effectively with the generation power of diffusion models.
Okay, so the philosophy is MLLMs are already brilliant at parsing complex text, understanding images, pulling up facts, doing that impressive in-context learning. Just let them keep doing that job.
Precisely. I mean, they've spent ages training on vast data sets to build up exactly that knowledge base and understanding. Why mess with it?
Right. And on the other side, diffusion models are currently, pretty much unmatched for generating photorealistic and creative images when given the right conditions. So the fundamental technical challenge, then, it seems, is how do you actually take that deep, nuanced understanding from a frozen MLLM one you're specifically not fine-tuning for generation and effectively transfer it over to guide a diffusion model?
Yeah, that's the crux.
Because a frozen MLLM isn't really built to just spit out pixel-level instructions or the kind of conditions diffusion models usually expect, right? Especially for tasks that need like interleaved text and image understanding or that sophisticated in-context generation stuff.
You've absolutely nailed the core problem there. While sure, a frozen MLLM can act as a decent text encoder for standard conditional generation, unlocking its deeper multimodal reasoning, its knowledge, and getting that transferred effectively for generation, that needs something smarter than just, say, grabbing its last layer embeddings. You need a proper dedicated bridge.
And that bridge is MetaQuery. Okay, looking at their overview diagram, figure 1, the key seems to be these things called learnable queries. What exactly are those? Are they like prompts?
They're essentially a set of randomly initialized tokens, think of them as vectors, that the model actually learns during the training process. So instead of feeding the raw input like the text prompt or image features directly into the generation part, these learnable queries get fed into the frozen MLLM itself.
Okay, hang on. So the MLLM gets the user's prompt, maybe looks at an input image, and it also gets these special learnable query tokens fed into it.
Yeah.
And its job then is to process all of that together and use its understanding to kind of answer or fill in the information specifically related to what the diffusion model needs downstream.
That's a really good way to put it. The frozen MLLM, using its huge knowledge base and understanding the context from the user's input, produces an output representation that's been conditioned by these learnable queries. The queries are basically probing the MLLM's internal state to extract the most relevant multimodal information for whatever the generation task is.
Like details about objects, scenes, styles, relationships.
Exactly, or even abstract concepts that are derived from reasoning about the input. All the good stuff the MLLM understands.
Got it. Okay. And then that representation, the one produced by the MLLM via these queries, that needs to be translated into a format the diffusion model can actually use as its condition, right?
Precisely. And that's the job of the Trainable connector module. It takes the output that comes from the frozen MLLM, the part corresponding to the learned queries, and basically transforms it into the right shape, the right dimensionality, so it can be fed into the diffusion model's UNet architecture to guide the whole denoising process.
Huh. So the only parts of the system that are actually learning, that are trainable, are these learnable queries and this connector module.
That's it.
And they're trained end-to-end using the standard denoising objective, the same loss function diffusion models always use.
Yep, the standard diffusion loss.
That seems really elegant. It directly ties the output of the MLLM via the queries and connector to the actual quality of the generated image. The flow seems clean. Input goes into the frozen MLLM along with the learnable queries. The MLLM outputs something based on those queries. That output goes through the trainable connector, becomes the condition for the diffusion model, and then you get your pixels.
Yes, that's the pipeline.
Yeah.
And it's, as you said, relatively simple and quite parameter efficient compared to trying to fine-tune a giant MLLM.
So how does this MetaQuery idea stack up against other ways people have tried to build these unified models or, connect LLMs to diffusion models?
Well, it differentiates itself in a few key ways. As we touched on, it avoids the whole complexity of monolithic autoregressive generation, predicting pixel by pixel.
Right.
And compared to simpler methods, like just taking the MLLM's last layer embeddings and feeding those directly as conditions, MetaQuery shows some pretty significant advantages, especially for those complex reasoning and in-context learning tasks we talked about.
Ah, okay.
Table 1 of the paper actually shows that the learnable queries, even with fewer tokens, can match the performance of using all the hidden states, which is kind of a proxy for using last layer embeddings. And with more tokens, they can even do better.
So that suggests it's not just about shoving some kind of MLLM output into the diffusion model.
Exactly.
It's about using these learnable queries to strategically pull out the most relevant and maybe the most compatible information needed for high-quality reasoned generation.
You got it. The way you extract the information from the MLM really matters. They also contrast it with approaches like LM Fusion, which apparently needs you to retrain a whole separate connector or adapter module for every single different MLM backbone you might want to use.
Oh, that sounds like a hassle.
Yeah, MetaQueries design seems more general. And while another method, GLLL, also uses learnable tokens into frozen MLLMs, it uses a different kind of loss function and seems designed for more specific contextual image generation tasks. MetaQuery is aiming for broader instruction following.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's dig into those specific design choices they studied to really optimize MetaQuery. First up, the learnable queries themselves. How many of these special tokens do you actually need? Is more always better?
They did a pretty careful ablation study on exactly that. The number of query tokens, which they call N figures 2 and 3 in the paper, have some nice visuals showing the impact. Basically, they found that increasing the number of tokens generally improves both how well the generated image aligns with the input prompt, and also the quality you get on image reconstruction tasks.
Does that suggest the queries are giving the MLM like more channels or bandwidth to communicate those really nuanced conditions?
That seems to be the intuition, yeah. For standard text to image, the visual quality kind of plateaus around, say, 64 tokens. But for complex, longer prompts, The alignment just keeps getting significantly better with more tokens.
Interesting.
And image reconstruction, which needs to capture really fine details, consistently benefits from having more tokens. So they ultimately settled on N256 for their main models, seemed to offer a good sweet spot, balancing performance across different tasks and, computational efficiency.
Okay, N256. The other really big design choice, maybe the core one, is keeping the MLLM frozen. My first thought is, well, why hobble yourself? Wouldn't fine-tuning the MLLM at least a bit make it even better at producing conditions specifically for generation?
That's a totally fair question.
Yep.
And the core rationale, which their experiments seem to back up, is that keeping the MLLM frozen preserves its state-of-the-art understanding capabilities. That's the key. If you start fine-tuning the entire MLLM on generation tasks, you run a real risk of what's called catastrophic forgetting.
Yeah.
It might just lose some of its original reasoning power, its knowledge, its core understanding abilities that it was trained so hard to get.
Okay. So you spend all this effort training the MLLM for understanding on a massive diverse data set, and you really want to keep that intelligence intact.
Exactly. So the crucial question then becomes, can a frozen MLLM working through MetaQuery and the connector still provide conditions that are good enough for competitive generation performance?
Then can it?
Well, Table 2 is where you want to look. It directly compares different training strategies. Strategy 1, frozen MLLM, just training the diffusion model and the connector. Strategy 2, fine-tuning the entire MLLM backbone as well.
Okay.
And the results show that the frozen MLLM approach actually achieves generation results that are comparable to, and on some metrics, even slightly better than fine-tuning the whole MLLM.
Wow.
But, and this is the kicker, it does it with significantly lower training costs and without degrading the MLM's performance on understanding benchmarks.
That's a really powerful finding then. It basically validates their core idea. You can get top-tier generation by leveraging the frozen understanding. You don't necessarily have to retrain the understanding engine itself for generation.
Precisely. It makes the whole process much more accessible and, frankly, more efficient.
Let's quickly touch on that connector component again. How exactly does it bridge the gap between the MLLM's output space and the diffusion model's input space?
Right, the connector. It's essentially a trainable transformer encoder. Its whole job is to take those representations that the MLLM outputs via the learnable queries, process them, and then project them into the correct shape and dimension that the diffusion model's UNet is expecting as input.
Okay.
They actually experimented with a few different designs for this connector, which you can see in Table 3. They found that an Ink-Proj design worked best.
Ink-Proj. Sorry, what does that mean?
Sure. So in the Ink-Proj design, the connector first processes the sequence of MLM output representations using its transformer encoder, while they're still in the original dimensionality of the MLM's hidden states, high dimensional.
Okay.
Then, after that processing, it applies a simple projection layer to map those process features down to the diffusion model's much lower expected input dimension.
I see. So it processes the information in its rich original format first, letting the transformer encoder capture all the relationships and context between the query outputs.
Right.
And then it sort of squashes it down to fit the diffusion model, as opposed to projecting first and then encoding.
Exactly. The alternative, ProjInk, projects first before the transformer encoder gets involved. Table 3 shows Ink-Proj was better, both in terms of final performance, and it was actually more parameter efficient too.
Interesting.
Yeah, it suggests that processing the MLM's output in its native, richer dimensionality before projecting is probably beneficial for preserving the quality of the conditioned information.
Fascinating detail. Okay, so you've got this architecture. Frozen MLLM, queried by learnable tokens, processed by this efficient Ink-Proj connector, feeding into a standard diffusion model. How do they actually train the trainable parts, the queries, and the connector?
Good question. The training happens in two main stages, pre-training and then instruction tuning. The pre-training is done on a pretty large data set, about 25 million publicly available image caption pairs. Standard stuff.
Okay.
And this stage just uses the normal denoising objective to teach the learnable queries and the connector how to effectively translate basic text prompts into decent conditions for image generation using the frozen MLM's understanding.
Right, get the basics down. And the instruction tuning, that's where they unlock the more advanced, the really complex capability.
Exactly. And this is where their approach to curating data for instruction tuning is, I think, particularly novel. They talk about it in Section 4. See, a common way to do instruction tuning is to use synthetic data, maybe generated by powerful expert models like GPT-4 or something.
Right, you'd have GPT-4 generate instructions, or maybe use an existing image model to create image editing examples.
Exactly that. but that can kind of limit the diversity of your data and potentially bake in biases from those expert models.
Makes sense.
So instead, they built this really scalable pipeline to mine naturally occurring image pairs directly from web corpora.
Naturally occurring pairs, what does that mean?
Think of images that just often appear together or are closely related out there on the web, like different angles of the same landmark, maybe an object before and after some change, or images that illustrate steps in a process described in accompanying text.
Oh, that's brilliant. So you're tapping into the vast inherent relationships that already exist in real-world web data.
It is pretty clever. They collected about 2.4 million such pairs. Then, and this is also smart, they use MLLMs themselves to automatically generate the instructions that describe the transformation or the relationship between the source image and the target image in each pair.
Ah, using the MLLMs to generate the instructions about the image pairs.
Right. This whole approach is highly scalable, and they argue it yields a much more diverse and crucially more realistic set of instructions compared to just relying on purely synthetic methods based on maybe one or two expert models. And they believe training on this unique data set is really key to unlocking many of the impressive generation editing capabilities they demonstrate later.
Okay, this is where we get to the payoff. With this architecture, with this unique training data, what can this MetaQuery system actually do? What results that really show this approach works in practice?
Well, I think the most significant so what is it really validates their core hypothesis. You can build a system that maintains state-of-the-art understanding while also achieving state-of-the-art level generation performance using this kind of decoupled approach. Table 4 shows really competitive results across a whole range of benchmarks.
Both understanding and generation.
Yep, standard MLLM understanding, benchmarks like MMEP, MMB, MMU, it holds its own there. And then on image generation benchmarks like FID, Geneval, the MEJ bench, it's right up there too. This is actually a pretty big deal because previous attempts at unified models often had to make a trade-off, They were good at one, but maybe not so great at the other.
Okay, so it performs well across the board, but it's not just basic generation, right? You mentioned it's leveraging the deeper capabilities of the MLLM.
Yes, and this, for me, is arguably the most exciting result. MetaQuery successfully transfers the MLLM's reasoning capabilities and its world knowledge into the image generation process.
How did it show that?
Well, look at Figure 9, for example. They ask it to generate an image representing the country where Yellowstone National Park is located. And it generates the U.S. flag. This isn't just simple text to image. It requires understanding the text prompt, knowing that Yellowstone is in the U.S., identifying the country, and then generating the flag associated with that country. That's complex, knowledge-augmented generation. And MetaQuery nails it.
Wow. Okay, so the frozen MLLM isn't just like converting text into some shallow image concepts. It's actually using its internal knowledge base to guide the generation process.
Absolutely. And they have quantitative proof, too. Table 6 uses the WISE benchmark. Table 7 uses Common Sense T2I. Both show MetaQuery significantly outperforming previous unified models and even some top specialized text-to-image models, specifically on tasks that require common sense reasoning and world knowledge.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and Table 9 specifically confirms that MetaQuery has a big advantage over just using the simpler last layer embeddings for these kinds of tricky reasoning tasks. They claim this is really the first time a unified model architecture has been shown to effectively transfer such deep reasoning and knowledge from the understanding side over to the generation side.
That genuinely feels like a new and important step. What about other tasks like image editing or maybe reconstruction?
It excels there too.
Yeah.
Figure 6 shows really impressive image reconstruction results, competitive even with big names like EMU2 and GPT-4o, even though reconstruction wasn't really its primary design goal. And then Figure 7 demonstrates really diverse image editing. Removing objects smoothly, changing attributes like color or texture, applying different artistic styles. And the paper shows in Table 10 that these editing capabilities are actually transferred pretty easily from the reconstruction training objective with just some very lightweight fine-tuning afterwards.
And that instruction tuning data set you mentioned, the one with natural image pairs, that unlocks the subject-driven generation.
Yes, exactly. And the examples they show in Figure 8 are quite compelling. You can take a reference image of a specific subject, like a particular dog or a toy robot, and then generate new images of that exact subject in different styles or contexts based on a text prompt.
Like putting a chef hat on that specific dog.
Precisely. Or generating that custom robot subject, but in, say, a Minecraft style. It achieves state-of-the-art results on the really tough Dreambench benchmark for this that's in Table 5. And it can even handle multiple custom subjects in the same image simultaneously.
The visual association examples in that second row of Figure 8 are also fascinating. Like, it recognizes a specific Porsche model from one image and generates a new view of that same model.
Yeah.
Or identifies Rockefeller Center and then generates a skyline from that landmark's perspective. That feels like it's really leveraging deep multimodal understanding, not just surface features.
Totally. It goes way beyond simple image manipulation. It requires the model to understand these complex relationships between visual elements and abstract concepts. It really demonstrates that the MLLM's deep understanding is genuinely informing the generation process in some pretty sophisticated ways.
Okay, so pulling all this together, beyond just these cool examples, why does this MetaQuery approach fundamentally matter for the future of multimodal AI?
I think it provides a really compelling blueprint for building highly capable unified models without the absolutely prohibitive cost and complexity of having to fine-tune these giant MLMs all the time.
Right.
It demonstrates pretty convincingly that you can decouple understanding and generation effectively. You can leverage these amazing specialized models we already have just by building an efficient trainable bridge between them. It preserved that hard-won, state-of-the-art understanding of the MLLMs while unlocking truly advanced generation capabilities.
And Table 8 even suggests the understanding and generation skills within MLMs might be somewhat independent.
Yeah, somewhat orthogonal, which kind of reinforces the validity of this whole decoupled approach. Why force them together if they work well separately?
So for researchers, for engineers trying to build these systems, this means a much more accessible, more efficient path towards developing sophisticated multimodal generation.
Absolutely. I mean, training just the MetaQuery components, the learnable queries and the connector, and maybe fine-tuning the diffusion model part, that's dramatically cheaper and faster than training, or even fully fine-tuning the entire MLM backbone. It really lowers the barrier to entry for exploring these advanced multimodal capabilities.
Yeah. Okay, so to quickly recap this deep dive then, the MetaQuery paper presents what looks like a powerful and, importantly, efficient architecture for unified multimodal AI. By using these clever, learnable queries to bridge frozen MLLMs and diffusion models, they've built a system that seems to maintain SOTA understanding and deliver SOTA-level generation. And this approach successfully transfers the MLLM's deep reasoning, its world knowledge, its in-context learning abilities, over into the image generation domain. And this enables some really impressive tasks like complex editing, reconstruction, and that novel subject-driven generation.
Right.
All with significantly greater training efficiency than methods that require full MLLM fine-tuning.
That's the core message, yeah. And interestingly, the authors themselves hypothesized near the end that the main gap between their system and maybe the absolute leading proprietary closed models might not even be architectural at this point. It might just be a matter of data scaling.
Oh, that's a very thought-provoking idea. So it suggests that this relatively simple, efficient architecture might have even more potential just waiting to be unlocked if they could train it on even larger, perhaps more diverse data sets, maybe building on that novel data curation process they developed.
Precisely. That seems to be what they're hinting at. And the architecture itself, because it's fundamentally about bridging different modalities, seems pretty generalizable. Section 3.1 even mentions the potential for extending this kind of approach to bridge MLLMs with models for totally different modalities, like audio or video, maybe even 3D generation.
Wow.
So this work could genuinely shift the focus in future research. Maybe less emphasis on just building bigger and bigger monolithic models and more towards developing even better, smarter bridging architectures and more innovative data curation strategies.
A potentially powerful new direction for the field. Well, if you, the listener, are keen to explore the specific quantitative benchmarks or dive into the architectural diagrams or just pore over more of those incredible visual examples seriously, you should check out Figure 8. We highly recommend you check out the full MetaQuery paper itself.
Absolutely. There's a ton of detail in there that really backs up these findings and offers a pretty clear potential path forward for building these unified models more effectively.